It's a real story. The Bell Witch. What if you were vengeful and utterly unrestricted by the veil between the physical and the next dimension? That's exactly what Kate Batts had going for her. She was a spiteful old woman who believed that she had been cheated in a land purchased by John Bell and was hell-bent, literally, on tormenting him and his children, or at least his favorite 12-year-old daughter, Betsy. On Kate's deathbed, she vowed to haunt the family of the Bells who had done her wrong. After her death, she made good her promise. It fell to the Bell family that this ghost took no other pleasure than tormenting them incessantly. Kate pinched their noses, poked needles into them, threw kitchen objects about, screeched at them in her now notorious high-pitched voice, pulled hair, and was a presence that none of them could escape. Kate's wrath was particularly directly at John and his favorite daughter, Betsy. With the wife and other children, she was sometimes heard crooning softly, saying something pleasant, or just ignoring them completely. John and Betsy were not so fortunate. Kate enjoyed mentally and physically torturing them with her shrieking voice or physically punishing antics. Gossip moved as quickly then as it does now, and this was a much-talked-about event in the small farming town of Adams, Tennessee. People were deeply fascinated by the rumors, and some even came from hundreds of miles away to visit the place of unrest. Some spectators were greeted with handshakes, some with shrieks, and some with a full dialogue of warning. So popular did the story become that General Andrew Jackson, the future president of the United States, gathered a few friends to investigate the story himself. He and his cohorts wanted to either debunk or repel the feisty spirit of Kate Batts. Jackson and his men were in for a surprise, though, when their wagons stuck fast to an otherwise smooth and flat road. Their jests of dealing with the witch came to a halt. No matter how they examined, pushed, cursed, or whipped the horses, their wagon was not moving. It was said that Jackson, in a fit of frustration and resignation, declared, "By the eternal, boys, it is the witch." Much to the amazement of Jackson and his men, the legendary screech could be heard from a nearby bush that replied, "All right, General, let the wagon move on. I will see you again tonight." Moments later, the wagon and horses were suddenly free to move about. There wasn't a person present that could account for the voice's owner or its whereabouts. Kate wasn't miserly in her haunting antics and bestowed upon Jackson and his men the same torturous treatment as she had John and his daughter Betsy. Jackson's bedcovers were repeatedly yanked from his body, and his men were delivered the same pinches and pokes as the family were. Jackson and his men realized they were no match for the Bell Witch and hastily abandoned their adventure first thing in the morning. Ghosts never die, so it was not surprising that the haunting of Kate lasted the duration of John Bell's life. In fact, the ghost of Kate Batts was said to have been responsible for John's death. In October of 1830, John Bell was rumored to have suffered a stroke and taken ill. While he was bedridden, his family found him in a particularly bad state of stupor and position. Alarmed, his son ran to the medicine cabinet to fetch what he thought was his father's medicine. After administering it, the family heard the witch's glee as she victoriously declared she had poisoned John herself the night before with that vial, and this last dose was surely his undoing. True enough it was. The contents were later examined by a doctor and found to be very poisonous. Kate was not satisfied with death alone. She sang in merriment at John's graveside and was still heard singing happily as the last person hastily left. It's a real story. The Queen Mary haunting. The Queen Mary was in service for decades as both a World War II transport ship and a luxury liner. It wasn't intended as such at the time, but the Queen Mary was named the Gray Ghost during the war because of the color she was painted to make her stealthy in the wartime waters. In her time, the Queen Mary carried seasick sailors, destitute stowaways, and wealthy vacationers. With this kind of history, it's not surprising she saw her own share of deaths, now a hair shy of 50. In fact, there are so many haunting that some parts of the ship are now barred from the public. But for the paranormally curious, there are still haunted tours of the cabins and halls that house death. You can also lodge at the Queen Mary, but after reading this, you may have second thoughts. Of the numerous deaths, there was a young seaman by the name of John Henry, who lied about his age, to procure a position on the Queen Mary, and was soon crushed to death while trying to flee a fire. 2. This day, knocks and bright lights can be heard around Engine Room 13, where the young man met his untimely death. It's even been reported that the door to the engine room is sometimes hot to the touch, or that mixed in with a ball of light is tendrils of smoke. If spooky little girls, like the ones in the Shinning, scare you, then you'll want to stay clear of the pool area. A girl from 3rd class thought she'd have some fun and slide down the banister, but a sudden wave upset her course, and she broke her neck on the fall. She now wanders the pool area and nursery looking for her doll or mommy. She is not alone, though. In the 30s and 60s, 2 other women met there. Unfortunate deaths in the pool area, and is seen periodically in that area. War always brings atrocities, but how about a cook that was cooked because the troops on board didn't like his meals? They stuffed him into the oven and burned him alive as a lesson for bad cuisine. His screams still echo his horrible death to this day. If you're still feeling brave enough to consider sleeping on the Queen, there was also a reported visitor that slipped a steward some cash in exchange for finding a willing female passenger to keep him company for the night. After stowing his luggage, a female companion was found, and they retired for the night. In the morning, the man was missing from the dining hall, so the steward went to find him. What they found instead was the corpse of the female companion. They could not locate the male guest, his registration information for that room, nor his luggage, which people swore was checked and stowed. He simply vanished and left only a trail of blood and rumors. The Queen Mary is home to 49 deaths, but she was also surrounded by death. In an attempt to avoid enemy ships, she zigzagged her way into her companion ship, nearly cutting it in half, and was forced to leave 300 survivors in the water to be eaten by sharks or drowned. It is reported that mysterious pounding on the side of the Queen Mary is those men trying to signal to come on board. The in-house psychic, Peter James, claims that he has communicated with over 150 separate ghosts on the ship. Peter gives bi-monthly ghost tours of the ship and claims to have made numerous contact with various ghosts, including a few mentioned above. From the sheer number and type of deaths that occurred, it seems plausible. It's a real story. The Amityville haunting. Though the Amityville house is most famously linked to the Ronald DeFeo killings in November of 1974, it was originally used to house Native Americans who were insane, sick, or dying. These individuals were buried on the property, evidently under less than peaceful circumstances. Could these spirits, buried on unconsecrated ground, have contributed to the later tragedy that made the house so infamous? In the early morning hours of November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo fatally shot his parents, 2 brothers, and 2 sisters. All were found in their beds, lying face down. Despite the houses in the neighborhood being close together, no one heard screams or noises. DeFeo claimed that ghosts were present during the murders and had goaded him into killing his siblings, though his original intent was only to execute his father. The home at 112 Ocean Avenue eventually went up for sale and was later purchased by George and Kathy Lutz for $80,000. Though the realtor disclosed the tragic history, the Lutzes were so enamored with the home, its pool, garage, and 4,000 square feet of waterfront that they immediately made an offer. Moving day should have been a clue. The family dog, leashed in the backyard, tried to flee the property, jumped a fence, and nearly hung himself. Though he survived the ordeal, this was an ominous sign of things to come. What followed couldn't have been dramatized better by Hollywood itself. The Lutzes claimed that keyholes oozed green slime, the toilet water turned black, and foul odors began to permeate the house. Septic issues? Possibly, but if it were, wouldn't the whole family have been affected, especially the children? Soon, strange noises began to fill the house. The front door slammed shut on its own, and phantom footsteps echoed through the rooms. George reported hearing static noises, When he investigated the basement, where they thought the sounds originated, he found the furniture rearranged and the carpets rolled back. At the suggestion of friends who had also experienced paranormal activity, the family began reciting the Lord's Prayer from room to room. That's when the static shifted into full-blown words, including one screamed phrase, "Will you please stop?" As if that were enough to drive the family out immediately, the spirits began to physically manifest. Kathy claimed she felt an unseen presence embrace her from behind. The family reported seeing eyes staring at them through the windows at night. When they checked, they found hoofprints outside, accompanied by an eerie squeal. Other sightings included a little boy on the second-story landing and a dark, cloaked figure. Their daughter Missy developed a ghostly friendship with an entity named Jody. Missy claimed that Jody was an angel who could change shapes. More chillingly, she said Jody told her, "You'll live here forever." The departure from the home remained somewhat ambiguous, but George later said it felt like the house itself was coming alive, with flexing walls and groaning sounds. During a violent storm, they fled to Kathy's mother's house. After the Lutzes abandoned the home, they requested the help of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens visited the house along with a Duke University professor and the president of the American Society for Psychic Research. Their findings included strong clairvisual and clairaudient messages from the spirits residing there. The air reportedly solidified, and Ed claimed to have seen shadows along with thousands of pinpoints of light in the cellar. Those shadows, he said, tried to push him around and terrified him. Everyone who participated in the investigation agreed. The house exuded pure terror. Lorraine Warren declared that the spirits had too strong a hold to be exorcised. The atmosphere was so oppressive that the Duke professor was rumored to have fainted from fear. It's a real story. Ghosts of the Tower. The Tower of London, dating back over 900 years, is known as one of the most haunted places in Britain. In 1078, the first stone section of the tower was built and commissioned by William the Conqueror. It slowly morphed over time, with additional structures and towers being added. Like Alcatraz, much human suffering went on within the cold stone walls, including executions, imprisonment, and torture. It was not just reserved for the lowly criminal, but for the famous and powerful as well. Social stature mattered not for the Tower of London. One recorded haunting from the 19th century was from a crown jewel keeper, E.L. Swift. He and his family were having dinner in the Martin Tower when his alarmed wife spotted a moving object. Both he and his wife witnessed what looked to be a cylindrical object, resembling that of a lab tube filled with blue bubbling fluid. Tube or not, the wife claimed it tried to grab her not sure how a tube with no hands would do that, but it gave the wife that impression. The tube seemed to be an apparition, as Swift tried to throw a chair at it, but it went straight through. It then vanished into thin air. Of the famous that haunt the tower, there are reports that the headless ghost of Anne Boleyn meanders the eerie corridors of the White Tower. She was one of 2 wives that were ordered for execution by her husband, Henry VIII, the other being Catherine Howard, and is also spotted in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, where she watches over her own grave under the altar. Catherine, on the other hand, can be heard screaming behind the door of the room she was kept in before her execution. Other famous ghosts include Thomas A. Becket, who was said to have struck down the traitor gate with a crucifix, witnessed by a priest. People have also seen 12-year-old King Edward V and his 9-year-old brother Richard, Duke of York, in the Bloody Tower, still wearing the white gowns they were imprisoned in. Foggy figures, soldiers, and 16-year-old Lady Jane Grey haunt the battlements of the Tower of London. Whole squads of soldiers have been seen marching the grounds. This place has no shortage of ghosts, as you can see. These famous rumors intrigued the BBC, and they teamed up with paranormal investigators to try and capture some of these ghostly images using special cameras that convert nighttime into day and use infrared light, aka black cameras. They also use temperature gauges and other devices to prove or disprove some of these haunting claims. Though they could disprove much of what seemed odd about the tower, there were still 10% of their experiences that baffled them. They also came away with wonderful images, including unusual orbs of light. They claimed they were much less skeptical after their investigation,